Hi, Nicholas. I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A real pleasure to speak to you today. How are you?
I'm very well. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Maybe we could begin with a brief introduction to this incredible film, Golda. What can audiences expect when they watch it?
I think number one, an incredible performance from Helen Mirren. I think it's absolutely world class, and she has embodied Golda Meir in a way that none of us ever imagined was possible. So I think that that's the headline. It's a tough film. It was a woman leading a country in a war, and it was brutal business. So it's not a comedy, but there's a lot to be learned from Golda Meir, and we tried to capture that in the movie.
And what was your kind of backstory to writing the script? Have to, admit it's not a period of history that I knew much about. Why was this a period of history that was so interesting to you, and particularly focusing on this figure? And why did you want to put it on the big screen?
I'm a little older than you, and I can remember Golda from my childhood. So the Yom Kippur War took place in 1973, and I was 10 years old, and I can remember it. I can remember Golda being on the screen in black and white, her craggy face, her shoes, and I remember the tension, and how anxious people were that Israel was going to be overrun by its neighbors, and there was going to be some sort of genocide. So I had this very, very old memory deep within me, which I began when I started thinking about what I was going to do after I'd finished on Florence Foster Jenkins. I was reading about Israel for my own personal interest, and geopolitics is the thing that really gets me excited. And her name kept cropping up, and I needed a job. And I suddenly thought, oh, I had one of those duh moments when I thought, look, it's staring you in the face. She's a great character. Actors love playing iconic characters. I thought, this might work. So I got going, and a mere 7 years later, here we are.
And what did that process look like? Because I guess when you're dealing with something that's real life history, you're having to strike that balance between, finding out all the facts, as much information as you can, but then of course also staying true to a dramatization with a narrative, et cetera, et cetera. So how did you? What was the research process like, and how did you want to kind of balance those two things?
I always think that the facts are going to be far more interesting than anything I could possibly make up. So I think number one is establish the facts. And that was quite a process, because there's, this 2-week period generated hundreds of thousands of documents that everyone has a different opinion, and getting down to the fine detail of who said what, when, and what happened was a mammoth task involving, dozens and dozens of interviews. And it was so complicated to try and understand what took place for me before I even begin thinking about what the story might be, the narrative I draw from it. It was so complicated that I actually drew up a spreadsheet, and I put every hour of every day on this spreadsheet and all of the characters, and so that I could just look at it and orientate myself, because a document would come in that was interested, and I think, well, where does this fit in with the rest of these documents? And we printed it out one day, and it was about the size of a sort of table tennis table, and it was only once we'd pulled that together that I was able to sort of see a narrative thread through it. So I did a very cheesy thing. I had this great square thing, and then I just put a line on the spreadsheet which just said movie moments, and I went through every column and said, what's the movie moment on this day? And it was this, and they were like, time for the fight back, and victory is in sight, release the Kraken was one of the movie moments, which was referring to Ariel Sharon, who was this extremely aggressive general. So I had this, this picture, and I boiled it down into what a movie might be, and that at least gave me a guide. So that's kind of how I did it. It was a lengthy process, but no one's challenged me to date on any of the actual facts. And in fact, several Israeli historians have been very, very complimentary about the accuracy of the film. So we'll see.
And like you mentioned at the beginning there, I mean, right at the center, this absolutely incredible performance from Helen Mirren, who I guess a real household name, quite a veteran of the screen. But, seeing her take this on, it's, and it's quite different from things she's done before. The physical transformation, how she take, this sort of the mannerisms, the chain smoking. So it's not just kind of the character itself, but also her presence. So what was it like knowing she was coming on board, and how did you kind of work together as a team with her to develop the character with her?
It was really interesting. I only met Helen very briefly at this because we were very pushed for time. It was just during the end of COVID. It was all very, very difficult, and she came to the studio, which was actually a disused primary school in Neasden. And we had the briefest of chats, and we'd spoken a little bit on the phone and this, that, and the other. But we were so rushed, and we immediately needed to kind of start creating Golda in terms of the physicality of it all. So the next time I saw her, the following day, she had her wig on. She was in costume. The first iteration of her makeup was in place, and it was already very good. There was a few things that needed to be done, and she'd been shown how Golda smoked by Golda's grandson. There was a particular way in which she held cigarettes and stuff. And then she was doing what actors do. She was in this, in the corner of this old chemistry lab or something like that. And she was just finding her way into the body. She was starting to walk and, adopt Golda's gait, and she started frowning and picking up a telephone and speaking and smoking. And I'd seen an actor do this before on Florence. I'd watched Simon Helberg working his way into this character in the same way, and he was just spent a few hours just sort of wandering around, and watching Helen suddenly transform into Golda was truly spooky, because this character had been dead for nearly 50 years. There she was, alive again, and it was really heart-stopping. And it was really the moment when I thought, well, you never know what's going to happen with the film, whether it's going to be successful or not. But I thought, I know for one thing that she will absolutely nail this role. And I felt enormous relief to see her. I thought, oh, this is going to be very, very good. And she was, she was. It's really a world-class performance.
And ultimately, what do you hope people will take away from watching it? I guess, as I said at the beginning, not a period of history that I know so well. It can be very educational, but it also, unfolds kind of like a thriller. Like, it's really edge of your seat, and you're sort of feeling, in her shoes in terms of all these decisions, the weight of all those decisions, and also how it must have felt to be a woman in that role, where it's just so male dominated in every direction she looks. And of course, that can still be the case today sometimes.
I think that what was special about Golda was her determination and her calmness under enormous pressure. She brought all of a huge life of experience to this moment. She had seen so much during her life, the pogroms in Russia. She'd seen the Holocaust. She'd seen Israel's fight for survival in 1948. It would be great for audiences to take away, a desire to find out more about her, to find out more about Israel and the Middle East, and through that, perhaps we can all develop a better understanding of what's taking place today, and the tragedy of what's taking place today. Golda was first and foremost a woman that wanted peace, and she achieved a peace with Egypt, which is her greatest legacy. But mostly it's a sense that, great leaders are people that really listen, and are then able, once they've taken you know, listened very well, are able to make very good decisions. And decisions really are when you're choosing between something that's absolutely dreadful and something that's dreadful, which is what she did very well. And the courage of one's convictions, and accepting responsibility when things go wrong as well, which we don't see so much of these days. So I think it's I hope people will enjoy the movie. It's not a comedy. There are some comic moments, but I hope people will find it moving and will enjoy it.
Amazing. Well, I'm out of time, but thank you so much for sharing all that with me. And yeah, can't wait for everyone else to have the chance to see the film. Thanks so much.
Nice to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. See you. Bye. Bye.